Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission is to take you beyond that one single iconic image that defines a legend and really introduce you to the fascinating, relentless engine of creativity that stood right behind it. Today, we are undertaking a deep exploration of the life, the radical methods, and the sheer willpower of Katsushika Hokusai.
It's so easy to just think of Hokusai as the man who drew the Great Wave. I mean, that single image is perhaps the most universally recognizable piece of Asian art in the world. But when you actually look at the sheer scale of his output, the constant reinvention, his incredible dedication, I mean, working virtually every single day for 8 decades, you realize you're looking at one of the great figures in human history, period.
We're drawing heavily on biographical material, on critical analyses and art historical context to understand not just the prince, but the man himself. Katsushika Hokusai, born around 1760, dying in 1849. He was really the undisputed master of the Japanese ukiyo-e style during the Edo period, active as a painter, a sketch artist, and a printmaker.
And we have to anchor the conversation, as everyone must, with The Great Wave off Kanagawa. It's the first print in his most iconic series, The 36 Views of Mount Fuji. It's so crucial to remember that this entire series, which also includes that famous profile of the volcano, fine wind, clear morning, people call it Red Fuji, that was the vehicle that secured his fame, both at home in Japan and then, much later, overseas.
And when we use words like prolific and master, we're not exaggerating. We're talking about an almost unimaginable level of dedication. Hokusai refined and improved his style right up until his death at age 88. The sources estimate his total lifetime output at over 30,000 separate works.
30,000.
Paintings, preparatory sketches, woodblock prints, illustrations for books. It's just a staggering amount.
To sustain that level of output over such a long, continuous career is astounding on its own. But what really elevates him beyond just, productivity is the innovation. He didn't just churn out similar images, he was constantly breaking new ground. He revolutionized drawing techniques, and he essentially expanded the boundaries of what Japanese popular art could even be.
Right. So our goal for you today is clear. We want to move beyond that universal icon of the wave and really understand the constant, the dramatic, and sometimes desperate shifts in his career. We want to see how this relentless innovator defined his art, his name, and ultimately how he influenced global culture across continents.
And to properly appreciate Hokusai's radical move, his turn toward landscape and natural themes, we first have to understand the environment he was born into, the world of ukiyo-e during the Edo period.
Let's unpack that term. What exactly is ukiyo-e? It translates to pictures of the floating world, right?
Yeah.
Why was Hokusai's work such a disruption?
Well, ukiyo-e was essentially the popular commercial art of the Edo period. It depicted the contemporary urban lifestyle, this world of pleasure and fleeting moments, a world that was really constrained by the strict social hierarchy and the isolationist policies of the shogunate. But initially, its scope was extremely narrow.
Meaning
That the vast majority of artists focused almost exclusively on portraiture, and specifically portraits of the popular celebrities of the day.
So like posters.
Almost exactly. You had 2 main categories. Bijinga, which were portraits of beautiful women, usually famous courtesans from the pleasure quarters, and yakusha, which were these dramatic portraits of popular kabuki actors. They were mass-produced for fans, really not that different from celebrity posters today.
So the art world was completely dominated by celebrity culture and this very standardized kind of portraiture.
Precisely. The visual language was highly conventional. It was focused on these idealized human figures. Hokusai was the one who was instrumental in fundamentally shattering that constraint. He took ukiyo-e and just broadened its scope dramatically. He turned his attention toward evocative landscapes, travel scenes, and these meticulously detailed studies of plants and animals.
So he made the world outside the theater and the pleasure quarter a legitimate, even a heroic subject for popular art.
That's it.
Yeah.
And if we look at Hokusai's whole trajectory, you'll see it's not a straight line of success at all. It's a zigzag of rejection, failure, rebranding, and then massive breakthroughs.
It's a powerful model of continuous reinvention across a lifetime. And it all begins with his formative years. Our journey starts with the circumstances of his birth. He was born Tokitaro on October 31st, 1760, in the Katsushika district of Edo, which is the northeastern part of modern Tokyo. The sources are really intriguing here because there's always been some ambiguity around his parentage.
It's widely accepted that he was the son of Nakajima Ise, who was a reputable mirror maker working for the shogun's court. This suggests a certain level of craftsmanship, maybe some proximity to power, but, and this is the key detail, Hokusai was never declared the official heir to the Nakajima family business.
And that's a crucial detail. In Edo period Japan, Inheritance was everything.
It speaks volumes. Because he wasn't made the heir, there is very strong speculation that his mother may have been a concubine, or perhaps Isis adopted him after he was born. Whatever the truth is, it hints at a slightly complicated or, tenuous family foundation. It gave him an outsider status from early on, which might have fueled his later independence.
He started painting remarkably young, around age 6. He likely picked up his initial techniques from his father, who actually painted decorative designs on the backs of the bronze mirrors he produced. But his teenage years were spent in very practical, non-fine art apprenticeships, right in the middle of the chaotic, bustling urban environment of Edo.
And those apprenticeships were foundational. They gave him skills far beyond just drawing. At age 12, he worked in a popular bookshop and a lending library.
So he would have seen everything.
Imagine the sheer volume of woodcut books, the popular entertainment of the era, just passing through his hands every day. He gained an immediate, intimate understanding of what the public consumed.
He understood the market, the audience, and the method of distribution.
Exactly. Then critically, at 14, he was apprenticed to a woodcarver until he was 18. This was the most hands-on experience possible in the actual production of woodblock prints.
So later in his career, when he was demanding specific technical changes from his block cutters, he was speaking from a deep professional understanding of their craft.
That foundational knowledge was invaluable, absolutely.
So after absorbing the entire commercial and technical process, he finally moved to formal artistic training. At 18, he entered the studio of Katsukawa Shunsho, who was the head of the Katsukawa school. And as we established, that school specialized in those traditional ukiyo-e subjects, actors and courtesans.
Right. And within a year, he received his first professional name from his master, Shunryu. It's under this name that he published his first prints in 1779, a series depicting kabuki actors. He was following the standard path for a talented ukiyo-e student.
While his early career was underway, his personal life was marked by some early tragedy. He married twice, and both of his wives died young in the early 1790s. Across these marriages, he had 5 children.
And this leads us to perhaps the most important family detail of all. His youngest daughter, Ai, who also went by the name He, she became an artist herself, and more crucially, she served as his highly skilled assistant throughout his later life.
She would sometimes even complete his commissions.
Yes. Their artistic partnership was a profound one. It suggests a supportive and dedicated family unit despite all the hardships.
The sources all seem to pinpoint the moment of his true artistic revolution, not as a moment of success, but as a period of profound professional rejection. This was after the death of his master, Shunshu, in 1793.
This is the critical turning point. Shunshu's chief disciple, a man named Shunkok, expelled Hokusai from the school. And to understand the gravity of this, you really need to know why.
What happened?
Hokusai was caught studying styles outside the approved Katsukawa curriculum.
And what specifically was he studying that was so bad it warranted expulsion?
He was delving into the rival Kani school, but also absorbing new European styles, likely through Dutch and French copper engravings that were brought into Japan via the port of Nagasaki.
Let's be clear about the context here. The Katsukawa school was commercial, popular, focused on immediate urban trends.
Right, and the Kani school, on the other hand, was the elite official style. It was favored by the shogunate and the ruling classes. It was scholarly, focused on historical and classical themes.
So Hokusai was effectively trying to bridge the popular commercial world with the scholarly elite world.
Exactly. And that transgression was unforgivable to Shunku, who valued tradition and commercial conformity within the school. This wasn't just losing a job. This was being publicly blackballed from the entire establishment. He was left professionally adrift.
That sounds absolutely devastating for an aspiring artist. And yet, this rejection ultimately became the foundation for his greatness.
He admitted it himself. Hokusai later said that the embarrassment he suffered at Shunku's hands was what really motivated the development of my artistic style. Faced with professional isolation, he had 2 choices: give up or forge a path entirely his own, and he chose revolution.
So what was the first tangible change that came from that newfound artistic freedom?
He deliberately abandoned the standardized, formulaic subjects of the Katsukawa school. No more simple portraits of actors and courtesans. His work pivoted entirely to 2 things: landscapes, which were considered a secondary genre in ukiyo-e until then, and crucially, images of the daily life and labor of ordinary Japanese people.
From all walks of life.
From peasants to merchants, across all social classes.
This sounds less like a breakthrough and more like a total redefinition of the genre.
It was. This shift was monumental. He took the technical prowess of ukiyo-e, the vibrant colors, the sharp lines, and applied it to the vast, complex world outside the urban pleasure quarters. And this move solidified his independence and launched him into his middle period, a time marked by incredible showmanship and prolific innovation.
That pivot to independence launched Hokusai into a middle period marked by, well, relentless artistic production, technical innovation, and an undeniable flair for self-promotion. He essentially became his own brand.
And central to that branding strategy was the constant renaming. Hokusai is famous for using at least 30 different names during his lifetime, which is highly unusual even for Japanese artists of that era. These changes weren't arbitrary at all. They were deliberate acts of artistic rebranding.
He was essentially shedding old artistic skins to herald entirely new phases of production and stylistic shifts. It's like a modern corporation launching a new product line under a different name every few years.
That's a perfect modern analogy. He treated his professional identity as a flexible tool, signaling to his audience and his publishers that a dramatic shift in subject or style was coming. By 1800, he adopted the name we know best, Katsushika Hokusai.
Let's break that name down for a second. Katsushika referenced his birthplace, so it grounded him geographically. But Hokusai means North Studio. Why the reverence for the North Star?
This gives us a little window into his personal spirituality. Hokusai was a devout follower of Nichiren Buddhism. The name Hokusai was an homage to the North Star deity Maitken, who plays a central role in his sect. So this wasn't just artistic branding. It reflected a personal, lifelong devotion that really permeates his work, especially his later paintings of dragons and protective figures.
And this period immediately brought success. In 1800, he published 2 of his first major landscape collections, Famous Sights of the Eastern Capital and 8 Views of Edo. He was now established enough to start taking on students. I think he eventually instructed about 50 pupils over his lifetime.
But fame in Edo wasn't just about technical skill. It required public spectacle. And Hokusai understood this perfectly. He was a master of using these theatrical stunts to boost his notoriety and his reputation.
Let's get into the stories from the sources. They are truly astonishing examples of what you could call performance art. Starting with the Edo Festival in 1804.
Oh, the story is incredible. At the festival, Hokusai created an enormous portrait of the Buddhist prelate Daruma. It's said to have measured 200 square meters. That's the size of a tennis court.
And he did it with what, a broom?
Using gigantic brushes, essentially brooms, buckets of ink, and some form of painting scaffolding.
That scale alone would have drawn massive crowds. He literally turned art into a monumental public event.
Exactly. This earned him the popular nickname Darusen, or Daruma Master. But the peak of his competitive showmanship came during a contest at the Shogun's court, where he was challenged by another artist.
How did he approach that competition?
The Shogun tasked the competing artists with illustrating a famous scene. Hokusai brought a piece of paper and 2 very unconventional props, a large jar of blue pigment and a chicken.
A chicken?
A chicken. He first painted this dramatic blue curve on the paper representing a river. He dipped the chicken's feet in red paint and then proceeded to chase the chicken across the paper, allowing its frantic footsteps to create these random red marks. He then presented the final piece, declaring it a landscape showing the Tatsuda River with red maple leaves floating in it.
He used a fleeing chicken to represent the poetry of autumn foliage. That's not just art, that's psychological marketing.
He won the competition immediately. That anecdote perfectly encapsulates his genius. Technical ability, combined with this sharp understanding of how to capture attention and deliver maximum artistic impact through completely unexpected means.
Beyond the spectacle, this middle period also involved heavy collaboration, most notably with the popular novelist Takezawa Bakken between 1804 and 1815.
Yes, their partnership produced some of the most popular illustrated books of the era, including the fantasy novel Strange Tales of the Crescent Moon. Hokusai provided these dynamic and detailed illustrations that really brought Bakken's dramatic narratives to life.
They produced 13 books together, which is a significant volume of work. Why did this successful partnership eventually fall apart?
The sources confirm the end came due to discordant personalities and conflicting opinions on how to draw illustrations. Hokusai's artistic vision was famously rigid and demanding. For instance, he wanted the illustrations to capture the dramatic, critical moments of the novel, while Bacon perhaps wanted them to be more narrative or decorative.
Can we get specific about those conflicting opinions? What artistic detail was worth dissolving a 13-work partnership over?
It seems Hokusai became frustrated with Bacon's tendency to dictate too much of the visual content. He believed the illustrations should be subordinate to the text. Hokusai, on the other hand, felt the illustrations were an art form in their own right, deserving of independence. Their clashing egos, the premier writer and the premier illustrator, just proved to be too much. It demonstrates that Hokusai valued his artistic control over even commercial continuity.
And this intense focus on control extended directly into the technical production of his prints. He wasn't hands-off once the drawing was finished.
Not at all. Hokusai was obsessively focused on maintaining quality control, particularly over the block cutters, who were the ones translating his design into the final wood matrix. He understood that a poor cut could ruin his genius design.
We have concrete evidence of this micromanagement. What did his letters to his collaborators demand?
Well, take the project illustrating the Chinese poetry anthology, Toshisen Afan. Hokusai wrote directly to the esteemed block cutter, Gaga Tomokichi, whom he usually respected.
And he criticized him.
He criticized him for having strayed from Hokusai's style in the cutting of certain heads. He noticed these tiny deviations.
That is remarkably specific feedback.
And he went even further when corresponding with another cutter, Sugita Kinsuke. Hokusai explicitly stated his dislike for the rival Utagawa school style that Kinsuke had used for the figure's eyes and noses.
Wait, he was correcting the aesthetics of specific facial features to reject a rival school's influence on his work.
Yes. And to ensure the correction was made properly, he didn't just criticize, he sent sketches illustrating both the Utagawa style he rejected and his own preferred style for eyes and noses. This just shows his dedication not just to quality, but to defining and preserving his unique, consistent artistic identity in every single output.
It's also worth noting that this intense output included the creation of shunga, or erotic art albums, during this period of increasing notoriety.
Yes, Hokusai, like many ukiyo-e artists, produced shunga. The most famous piece is the controversial and complex image, The Dream of the Fisherman's Wife, published in 1814. It depicts a young woman sexually entwined with a pair of octopuses. It's a highly stylized, sometimes humorous, representation of sex, which was a common, if generally unlicensed, subject in the floating world.
Around 1811, he transitioned into a new period, adopting the name Taito. And this is defined by his intensive shift into instructional art and the publication of his famous manuals.
The Taito period saw the creation of Edafon art manuals, such as Quick Lessons in Simplified Drawing in 1812. These manuals served a very practical purpose. They were a quick commercial way to generate income and at the same time attract a wider pool of students who would pay tuition.
And this leads us to the monumental work that defined this period, the Hokusai manga. We often hear the word manga today and associate it with Japanese comics, but Hokusai's original concept was different.
Very different. The term manga literally meant random drawings or sketches of life. The first volume was published in 1814, and it was an immediate commercial sensation. The scope was just staggering. He produced 15 volumes in total, 3 of which were published posthumously, containing thousands of drawings.
What made these volumes so captivating to the public and so important to later artists?
It was a visual encyclopedia of the entire Edo world. The volumes contain this monumental, eclectic scope of sketches, detailed objects, accurate depictions of plants and animals, religious figures, architecture,
And people.
and crucially, people in every possible posture and scenario, often infused with a sharp, humorous edge.
So it wasn't a narrative comic, it was a catalog of technique and observation.
Precisely. It served as a masterclass in drawing technique, capturing motion, expression, and posture with this economic elegance. This visual resource was absolutely critical for cementing his reputation as the premier draftsman of his time, and it proved instrumental in influencing later European artists who sought to capture motion in daily life with similar spontaneity.
Following his prolific instructional period, Hokusai entered what is arguably his most recognized phase, coinciding with his name change to Itsu around 1820. This is the period where artistic skill, subject matter, and commercial success all peaked.
The name Itsu literally ushered in his greatest period of fame throughout Japan. It was during this time in his early 60s that he focused his immense skill on the subject that would define his legacy, the mountain.
The creation of the 36 views of Mount Fuji. It's the centerpiece of this era. But we have to ask, why that mountain and why then?
Well, the timing was perfect. Japan was experiencing a domestic travel boom. More people than ever were traveling, and Mount Fuji, long considered sacred, was the ultimate pilgrimage site. Hokusai capitalized on this national interest, but it was also fueled by his own intense, almost spiritual fascination with the mountain. He saw it as this eternal pillar, capturing it from every possible perspective in every season and every weather condition.
Let's focus on the technical brilliance of the Great Wave. Why did this particular image resonate so universally, and why is it considered such a technical leap forward?
Its technical mastery lies in two key areas. First, composition. The use of that massive curling wave creates a powerful sense of dynamic energy, which contrasts so sharply with the small, stable triangle of Mount Fuji in the background. The visual tension is just immediate.
And the second area of innovation.
It's his sophisticated use of Western linear perspective. Hokusai had been studying this in depth, documenting it in his manga. By using recession and scale, he makes you feel the depth and volume of the ocean, something that was generally absent in earlier, flatter ukiyo-e landscapes.
And he used a new pigment, didn't he?
He did. He used Prussian blue pigment, a new synthetic color imported from the West, which provided this stable, powerful blue that defined the print's entire mood.
It's the perfect marriage of Eastern composition and Western technical advances. The commercial success was so enormous that the sources note he had to produce 10 supplementary prints, making the final series 46 images in total.
The demand was relentless. But Hokusai didn't just rest on that success. He continued to produce a variety of other popular and technically challenging print series during this Itsu phase.
His work on water is particularly famous, for example.
Absolutely. Think of a tour of the waterfalls of the provinces. Each print shows water in a dynamic, almost impossible state of motion, capturing the spray, the force, the texture of rushing water, a highly challenging subject to render in a woodblock print. He also produced unusual views of celebrated bridges in the provinces and oceans of wisdom, continuing to explore how human structures and activities interact with these vast natural forces.
And his meticulousness extended beyond grand landscapes to small, intimate studies of nature.
Yes, his kache, or detailed individual images of flowers and birds, are equally masterful. Examples like poppies or the detailed flock of chickens showcase his ability to render the finest texture and the most complex biological forms with incredible accuracy and beauty. It proves that whether the subject was a single petal or a gigantic wave, Hokusai's commitment to technical perfection remained absolute. And this brings us to Hokusai's final and perhaps most emotionally resonant phase, beginning around 1834. He adopted the name that perfectly encapsulates his lifelong obsession.
Dakyurujin Manji, the old man mad about art. It's an iconic self-proclaimed title confirming his identity as an artist driven by a singular, intense purpose.
During this period, even in his 70s and early 80s, the prolific work just continued. He produced 100 views of Mount Fuji, not just the 36 views. This later work, produced in book form, is generally regarded by critics as the masterpiece among his landscape picture books for its profound depth and spiritual insight.
And it is within this masterpiece that we find Hokusai's famous colophon quote, "A moment of reflective humility and truly staggering ambition that really sets the standard for artistic dedication."
This quote reveals everything about his inner life. He stated, looking back, that by his 70th year, he had achieved a certain level of skill but felt there is nothing worth taking into account. He saw all those decades of mastery as merely preparation.
He then cast his vision forward, outlining a schedule for mastery that was, frankly, superhuman.
He detailed his continuous aspirations. At 73 years, I partly understood the structure of animals, birds, insects, and fishes, and the life of grasses and plants. Then, the legendary part.
The 100-year plan.
100-year plan. At 90, I shall even further penetrate their secret meaning, and by 100, I shall perhaps truly have reached the level of the marvelous and divine. When I am 110, each dot, each line will possess a life of its own.
The man who had produced 30,000 works and revolutionized art still believed he wouldn't become a real painter until he was 110. It's an extraordinary psychological insight. It suggests that mastery, for Hokusai, was a perpetual state of striving, never a fixed achievement.
That's the essence of his artistic ethos. For him, the quest for perfection was the art form itself. But despite this intellectual ambition, the reality of his later years was fraught with financial and professional setbacks.
His final major print series, 100 Poems Explained by a Nurse, produced around 1835-1836, was never published in full. And this wasn't a failure of quality, but a failure of the market.
And this failure is crucial for understanding the historical context. This period was marked by the strict tenpope reforms, which were implemented by the shogunate in the mid-1830s. These were austerity measures designed to stabilize the economy and reinforce traditional morality.
And how did government austerity impact a master artist?
These reforms placed heavy restrictions on publishing, on luxury goods, on entertainment. Publishers faced financial hardship, censorship increased, and the market for expensive, elaborate print series just dried up. Hokusai's publishers simply couldn't afford to complete and market the series, despite its quality.
His art, for the first time, was a victim of political and economic reality.
Exactly. And the setbacks continued into the next decade.
Right. In 1839, a devastating fire ruined his studio and destroyed much of his accumulated preparatory work and existing paintings. For an artist in his late 70s, losing decades of accumulated material is a tragedy of massive proportions.
It's hard to even imagine.
How does an 80-year-old artist recover from such a loss, especially with the concurrent rise of younger rivals like Ando Hiroshige? Did this loss significantly change his style or his subjects?
It didn't crush him, but it certainly forced more resilience. Instead of retiring or letting the fire define him, he simply kept moving. His style didn't necessarily change drastically, but the subject matter often became more intensely focused on singular, powerful images, perhaps reflecting the limited time and resources he had left.
That resilience is perfectly illustrated by his travel to Abuse at age 83.
Indeed. He traveled to the rural town of Abuse, where he stayed for several years at the invitation of a wealthy farmer and patron, Takai Kozan. This ability to attract patronage, even in old age and outside the main city, shows his enduring reputation. His time in Abuse was highly productive, yielding later masterpieces like the painted scrolls of the masculine wave and the feminine wave.
It's astounding that he was still creating major, technically demanding works in his mid-80s. And the daily practice he performed during this time also speaks to his need for protection and focus.
Between 1842 and 1843, he performed Nishin-joma, his daily exorcisms. Every morning, without fail, he would paint Chinese lions, or shishi, in ink on paper. This was done as a talisman against misfortune, a ritualized daily drawing practice designed to protect his creative energy and ward off bad luck.
There was a tangible link between his artistic output and his religious devotion.
Yes, and he literally worked to his last breath. The sources mention final, completed works in early 1849, the year he died.
What were they?
He was working on large, powerful paintings like the Dragon of Smoke escaping from Mount Fuji and the evocative tiger in the snow. These final pieces are just imbued with the energy and ambition of an artist who knew his time was running out but refused to stop striving.
Which brings us back full circle to his final humbling words. Despite creating 30,000 pieces, achieving massive fame, and declaring himself the old man mad about art, what did he cry out on his deathbed at age 88?
It is the ultimate statement of an artist's perpetual dissatisfaction. He cried out, "If only heaven will give me just another 10 years, just another 5 more years, then I could become a real painter." He died shortly thereafter, on May 10th, 1849.
His final reflective haiku captures that passing moment of tireless striving. Though as a ghost, I shall lightly tread the summer fields. He left behind not only a mountain of work, but an international legacy that would soon sweep across Europe and change the course of modern art. Hokusai's intense dedication to his craft was only matched by his profound influence, and an influence that was felt most acutely in Europe after his death, fundamentally altering the course of 19th century aesthetics, a movement we now know as Japanism.
It is deeply ironic, isn't it, that Hokusai, who was expelled from his school for looking west, later became the single most important artistic figure to travel back east, so to speak. His use of Western linear perspective and his bold compositional techniques meant his work was uniquely poised to captivate European audiences when it was finally discovered.
So how exactly did Hokusai's work jump the cultural and geographical barrier from isolationist Japan to 19th century Paris?
Well, the beginning of the Japanism craze is often traced to Paris around 1856, after Japan was forced to open its ports. A French printmaker named Félix Bracquemond made the key discovery. He found a copy of a Hokusai sketchbook, most likely the manga, at his printer's workshop.
So technical drawing manual rather than a finished print sparked the revolution.
Yes. Bracquemond was instantly captivated by the spontaneous lines, the dynamic energy, the unconventional compositions. He immediately shared his discovery, and the aesthetic quickly jumped from fine art to commercial design.
And Bracquemond used this new influence almost immediately in a highly public, commercial way.
He designed the elegant Rousseau service dinnerware for François-Eugène Rousseau. This set was a sensation at the 1867 Universal Exposition in Paris. And critically, the dinnerware featured images of birds and fish copied directly from Hokusai's illustrations.
And what made the design feel so modern and radical to European eyes?
The composition was revolutionary for Western ceramics at the time. Instead of placing motifs centrally and symmetrically, the images were placed asymmetrically, often floating off the edge of the plate. It created a sense of natural movement and spontaneity.
That asymmetric, nature-focused aesthetic then rapidly permeated fine art, design, even architecture.
Absolutely. And so Hokusai's woodcuts were collected not by scholars, but by the radical avant-garde painters who are defining modern art.
His influence is just inescapable across major European art movements. Impressionism, for instance, owes a massive debt. Claude Monet and Pierre-Auguste Renoir studied his use of bold outlines and flattened planes of color.
And his influence also drove Art Nouveau, or Jugendstil in Germany. The serpentine lines and organic, naturalistic motifs that defined Art Nouveau from posters to ironwork, they visibly borrowed from Hokusai's expressive drawing techniques.
He taught European artists how to draw movement with minimal effort and maximum impact.
And we are talking about a generation of masters who looked directly to Hokusai, Degas, Gauguin, Klimt, Van Gogh, Manet. They didn't just admire him, they internalized his methodology.
There's that great quote from Degas.
Yes, their admiration was profound. Consider the words of the painter Edward Degas, who was an avid collector of Japanese prints. Degas stated, "Hokusai is not just one artist among others in the floating world. He is an island, a continent, a whole world in himself."
That statement just places Hokusai on a level far beyond his contemporaries.
It does. And the cultural reach extended far beyond the visual arts, too, crossing over into music and literature.
The connection to Debussy.
Yes. The relationship between the Great Wave and French composer Claude Debussy's groundbreaking tone poem La Mer, which debuted in 1905, is fascinating. Debussy had an impression of the wave print hanging prominently in his living room.
And he didn't just passively admire it.
No. He specifically requested that the Great Wave be used on the cover of the published score for La Mer. The music itself is known for its shifting, impressionistic harmonies and dynamic changes, which art critics have long connected to the visual power and sense of scale and motion Hokusai captured in the print.
His legacy continues to inspire contemporary literature, where authors still draw inspiration from his structural focus on the mountain.
Right. The science fiction author Roger Zelazny won a Hugo Award for his short story, 24 Views of Mount Fuji by Hokusai, where the protagonist visits the precise locations Hokusai painted, using the artistic journey as a framework for the narrative.
And Hokusai remains intensely relevant today, drawing huge crowds and generating media attention centuries after his death.
Major high-profile exhibitions like the comprehensive 2017 British Museum exhibition of his later work continue to attract visitors from across the globe, reaffirming his status as a permanent fixture in the art canon. We also see his family story being actively explored in modern media, including the excellent film Miss Hokusai about his daughter Ai.
It's important, though, to remember the initial function of these profound works. They were not created for museums.
Absolutely not. His print, store-selling picture books, and ukiyo-e is a perfect visual reminder of this. These woodblock prints were not rarefied pieces locked away in palaces. They were affordable, mass-produced items sold in local shops. Hokusai, the revolutionary genius, was fundamentally an artist of the people, whose widely circulated high-quality prints democratized complex art.
As we conclude this deep dive, let's return to that powerful, overarching theme that defined the long life of Katsushika Hokusai, the relentless, almost obsessive pursuit of mastery.
We have traced an artistic journey spanning nearly 80 years. This is a man who radically reinvented his style dozens of times, changed his name over 30 times to signal those shifts, and produced an estimated 30,000 works, all while embracing the title of the old man mad about art.
He treated every decade as a new preparatory phase. He absorbed the work of rivals, studied foreign techniques, weathered financial ruin and fire, and still believed, in his final moments, that he needed just another 5 more years to become a real painter.
This raises a powerful question for you, the listener, who is striving for expertise or skill in your own field. If a figure of Hokusai's caliber, a man who fundamentally changed the direction of global art and whose technical skill was universally recognized, never felt by his own criteria that he had fully achieved mastery, what does that tell us about the nature of the quest itself?
It suggests that perhaps the greatest mastery isn't found in a definitive endpoint or a final achievement, but rather in the ceaseless, lifelong effort to improve, to reinvent, and to remain mad about the act of creation itself.